My name is Margaret, and there are days when the past feels closer than the present, not because I want to live in it, but because memories have a strange way of rising when your life becomes quieter. When you're young, you are too busy running toward tomorrow to look back, but when you're older, tomorrow no longer feels like a race. It feels like a gentle walk. And then, suddenly, you begin noticing what is behind you. That is what happened the day I opened my old photo album. It began as a simple task. I was cleaning a shelf in my living room, the kind of slow, careful cleaning older women do, moving objects with both hands, dusting with patience, remembering the stories attached to every small thing. My home is full of memories in physical form: a mug that belonged to my husband, a scarf my daughter gave me years ago, a small wooden box with letters I never throw away, and on that shelf, pushed slightly behind some books, I found the photo album. The cover was worn, the corners were soft from being handled. A thin layer of dust rested on it like time itself had been sitting there quietly. I held it in my lap and stared at it for a long moment. My fingers traced the faded surface, and I felt something in my chest tighten. Not fear exactly, but emotion that didn't have a clear name yet. Sometimes old photographs feel like comfort. Other times they feel like a mirror, and mirrors can be difficult when you have spent years being hard on yourself. I carried the album to my chair by the window and sat down slowly. The sunlight that morning was warm but gentle, pouring into my living room as if it wanted to soften whatever I was about to feel. I placed a cup of tea nearby and rested the album on my knees. My hands hesitated. I asked myself quietly, why am I nervous? Then I realized the answer: because every picture holds a younger version of me, and I didn't always treat her kindly in my mind. In my head, the younger Margaret was a woman I judged. I judged her choices. I judged her mistakes. I judged the way she stayed too long in certain situations. I judged how tired she became. I judged how often she smiled when she wanted to cry. I carried regret like a hidden thread woven through my memories. And regret is heavy when you hold it for decades. I opened the album carefully. The first photograph was simple, a black and white picture of me as a girl, not even a teenager yet. My hair was braided, my smile was shy, my eyes were wide as if the world still felt full of mystery. I stared at that girl and felt my throat tighten instantly. She looked so innocent, so unaware of what life would ask of her. I turned the page slowly. There I was as a young woman, wearing a dress that seemed too big for my thin frame. My expression was serious. I remembered that day. I remembered how nervous I felt. I remembered how I wanted to appear grown up, as if looking mature would protect me from pain. Then I turned another page. There was my wedding photograph. I was smiling, standing beside my husband. His arm was around my waist. We looked happy, and in that moment I realized something I hadn't admitted before. I missed that hope. Not because the marriage was perfect, it wasn't, life never is, but that younger Margaret believed in happiness so purely. She believed love would solve everything. She believed if she tried hard enough, everything would stay safe. I stared at that photo longer than I expected, and then I felt my chest tighten with a different emotion: guilt, because I had spent years looking at my past with harsh eyes, as if my younger self should have known better. But how could she? She didn't have my age. She didn't have my wisdom. She didn't have my scars. She only had hope. I turned the page again and saw photographs of my children when they were small. My daughter with messy hair and a wide grin, my son holding a toy, looking proud like a little man. Photos of birthdays with cakes, photos of school days, photos of family trips, and suddenly the room around me faded. I could almost hear their laughter again. I could almost smell their shampoo and the warm scent of home-cooked meals. I could almost feel their small hands pulling at my sleeves. My eyes filled with tears, but not because I was sad, because I remembered how much I loved them. I remembered how much I gave. I remembered how much of myself I poured into those years. And yet, as I looked at the photographs, another truth arrived too. I looked tired in many of them, not dramatic tired, not crying tired, just worn. In one photograph, my smile looked forced. In another, I looked distracted. In another, my eyes seemed far away. I stared at those pictures and felt the old judgment rise again. Why didn't you enjoy it more, Margaret? Why didn't you rest? Why didn't you take care of yourself? Why did you always put yourself last? The harsh voice inside my head had lived there for a long time. It was the voice that blamed my younger self for being human, for being exhausted, for being overwhelmed. I closed the album slightly, my hands shaking. I felt the weight of everything, the beautiful memories, the regret, the tenderness, the pain. Then I took a slow breath and looked out the window. The world outside was calm. The sunlight touched the floor softly, and a thought came to me, a thought that felt like wisdom rather than judgment. Margaret, she did the best she could. I opened the album again and looked at the photographs with different eyes, not the eyes of a critic, not the eyes of an old woman counting mistakes, but the eyes of someone who finally understood what survival costs. I whispered softly, as if the younger Margaret could hear me through time. You did the best you could. And for the first time in many years, I believed it.
And that belief didn't arrive like a miracle. It arrived quietly, the way morning light arrives, slowly, gently, almost unnoticed. But once it was there, it changed the way everything inside me felt. I turned the next page of the album with careful hands, as if I were touching something fragile. The photographs seemed to glow in the sunlight, not because they were perfect, but because time gives even ordinary moments a kind of holiness. The more I looked, the more I realized how often I had been unfair to the younger Margaret. I had expected her to be wise, calm, confident, and emotionally mature, even when she was young, even when she had no support, even when life was demanding too much. That expectation was impossible, and yet I carried it like a rule. In one photograph, I was standing in a kitchen holding a baby on my hip. My hair was messy, my clothes looked tired. The baby's face was joyful, cheeks round, mouth open in laughter. And there I was, smiling, but with dark circles under my eyes. I could almost hear the sound of that moment. The clatter of dishes, the hum of the refrigerator, the baby's laughter mixed with my quiet exhaustion. At first, the old voice in my head tried to return. You look worn out. You should have been happier. You should have been more grateful. But I stopped it. I looked at that photo again, and I asked myself a new question. What was she carrying that no one saw? That question softened everything, because I remembered that time. I remembered how little sleep I got. I remembered how I felt guilty even for sitting down. I remembered how I tried to make every day feel safe for my children, even when I didn't feel safe inside myself. I remembered worrying about money, about health, about whether I was raising them correctly. I remembered the pressure of always being needed, and I remembered how I smiled anyway.
I stared at the photo and whispered, "You were brave." Not because she did something dramatic, but because she endured, because she kept the home warm when her own heart was tired, because she held babies with aching arms and still managed to sing to them softly, because she didn't abandon love even when she felt empty. I turned another page and saw a photograph of my children at school age. They were standing in front of a classroom, dressed neatly, smiling proudly, and behind them, slightly out of focus, was me, a mother in the background, a mother holding a bag, a mother watching with a smile. I looked at that version of myself and realized something painful. I had been in the background of my own life. I had made sure everyone else was in focus, their needs, their dreams, their milestones, and I didn't regret that love. I never will. But I regret how little I cared for the woman doing it all. I regret how often I treated myself like a machine instead of a person. I kept turning pages. There was a photograph from a family holiday. We were all sitting at a table. My husband was laughing. The children were eating. The room looked full and warm. But when I looked closely, I noticed my expression. I looked tired. Not angry, not unhappy, just tired. And my heart ached because I remembered that day too. I remembered preparing everything. I remembered cleaning. I remembered making sure everyone had enough food. I remembered carrying the invisible work of making holidays feel magical. And then, when everything finally happened, I sat down and watched everyone enjoy it while I felt like my energy had already been used up. For years, I looked back at memories like that and blamed myself for not being more present. But now I understood something new. Presence requires care. If you are never cared for, presence becomes difficult. I closed my eyes for a moment and let that truth settle. Then I opened them again and looked at the photographs with fresh kindness, like I was meeting a friend's task, not my own. Because when it's someone else, we understand easily. We say she did her best. We say she was under pressure. We say she deserved more help. But when it's us, we often choose cruelty. I realized I had been cruel to the younger Margaret in my thoughts. I had punished her for her limits. I had punished her for not knowing what I know now. I had punished her for being human. I turned to a page with a photograph of myself alone, a rare one. I was sitting on a bench, holding a small bag, looking off to the side. My expression was thoughtful, almost sad. I remember that day, too. I had gone to buy groceries, and for a few minutes I had sat down to rest. I remember feeling guilty for resting. Even in that photo, guilt followed me. I looked at her face, younger, yes, but still serious, still trying to hold life together, and I felt something crack open in my chest. She was not weak. She was overwhelmed, and she deserved compassion. I reached for a pen and a small piece of paper on my table. My hands moved slowly, but with purpose. I wrote a sentence in careful letters. I did my best with what I knew. Then I wrote another. I was worthy of kindness, too. I placed that note gently inside the album, like a secret message traveling back through time. Then I whispered softly, "I'm sorry." I wasn't apologizing for mistakes. I was apologizing for how harsh I had been. I was apologizing for the years I carried shame instead of softness. I turned one last page and found a photograph of myself smiling truly, a rare, unguarded smile. I stared at it and felt my eyes fill again, because she was still there, the real me, the one who deserved gentleness all along. And in that moment, I understood the real lesson of the album. The past doesn't need punishment. The past needs forgiveness.
Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. I held that thought gently as I turned the album pages back again, slower this time, as if I wanted to say goodbye properly. The photographs did not change, of course, but I did. The way I looked at them changed. The way I spoke to myself changed. For so many years, my memories had been sharp. I thought that was wisdom, to remember mistakes, to replay them, to learn. But what I didn't realize was that replaying pain without compassion does not teach you. It only hurts you again. You can't heal a wound by pressing on it every day. I reached down and closed the album softly. The sound of it closing was quiet, but something inside my chest felt like it closed too, not in a shutting down way, but in a completing way, like a chapter gently ending. I sat there by my window for a long while, my tea cooling beside me. The sunlight moved slowly across the room. I watched dust particles floating in the air like tiny sparks. Everything felt calm, and in that calm, I began to see my life differently. I thought about all the times I looked back and felt embarrassed, all the times I wished I had been braver, all the times I wished I had said no, all the times I wished I had walked away sooner, all the times I wished I had spoken up. Those regrets were real. I wasn't trying to erase them. But now, instead of using them as weapons against myself, I was holding them like lessons held in warm hands. I realized something that surprised me. The younger Margaret needed kindness more than correction. Correction is cold. It says, you should have known better. Kindness is warmer. It says, you were trying. And when I finally offered that kindness to my past self, something in my present began to soften too. I noticed that my shoulders were not as tight as usual. My jaw was relaxed. My breathing was deeper. It felt like my body had been waiting years for my mind to stop fighting. Later that afternoon, my daughter called. I answered, and she asked her usual gentle questions. Have you eaten? Do you need anything? Are you feeling okay? I paused before replying, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I suddenly felt honest. I'm okay, I said softly. Actually, I feel peaceful today. She sounded surprised. Peaceful, she repeated. What happened? I looked at the album resting on my lap and smiled faintly. I looked at old photographs, I told her. She laughed gently. That always makes me emotional, she said. Did you cry? Yes, I admitted, but not in a bad way. My daughter was quiet for a moment, then asked softly, what kind of way? I thought carefully because the truth mattered. In a forgiving way, I said. She breathed out slowly. I like that, she whispered. I'm glad you had that. After the call ended, I felt even warmer inside. I realized my healing wasn't only for me, it was also quietly changing the way I showed up for my family. When you stop being harsh toward yourself, you become gentler toward others too. Not because you force it, but because gentleness spreads naturally when it finally has a home inside your chest. That evening, I made dinner slowly and calmly, listening to soft music. I didn't rush. I didn't judge myself for the pace. I didn't call myself lazy. I didn't criticize my body for being older. I moved with patience, as if my hands deserved respect for everything they had done. And while I cooked, I remembered something I once told my children when they were small. If you spill it, it's okay. We'll clean it. I used to say that to them, but I never said it to myself. So I whispered it now, quietly, to my own heart. If you make mistakes, it's okay. We'll heal. Later, I opened the album again, not because I was searching for pain, but because I wanted to look at my younger self with kindness on purpose. I turned to the first page again, the girl with braided hair and wide eyes. I stared at her and spoke softly as if she could hear me. I'm proud of you, I whispered, because she lived, because she survived, because she kept going even when she didn't know how she would. Then I turned the page to the young woman in the big dress, serious and nervous. I'm sorry, I told her gently. I'm sorry the world made you think you had to be strong all the time. Then I turned to the photograph of me as a young mother with a baby on my hip, tired eyes, messy hair. You deserved help, I whispered. You deserved rest. I kept turning pages, whispering kindness like prayers, not dramatic, not loud, just quiet honesty. And with each gentle sentence, it felt like I was pulling a thorn out of my memory. Finally, I reached the later pages, the photographs where I was older, where my face already carried more lines, where my posture had softened. And I realized something beautiful. The past did not ruin me. It built me. Even the painful parts built me. The heartache taught me empathy, the exhaustion taught me patience, the loneliness taught me appreciation, the mistakes taught me humility, and the love taught me everything. I closed the album again and placed it on the shelf, but this time it felt different. It didn't feel like a box of regret. It felt like a book of survival, a book of lessons, a book of proof that I lived a full life. If you're listening to my story right now, I want to tell you something gently from an older woman's heart. Be careful with the way you speak to your younger self. That version of you was learning in real time. That version of you was doing the best they could with limited knowledge, limited support, limited strength. That version of you didn't deserve punishment. They deserved compassion. And if you can learn to be kind to your past, your present will become lighter. That night, I sat by my window again, warm light resting on my silver hair. The street outside was calm, my tea was warm, my breathing was slow. And for the first time in a long time, I looked back on my life and didn't feel shame. I felt gratitude. I felt forgiveness. I felt peace. I rested my hands in my lap and let a gentle smile appear, because I had looked at old photographs and learned to be kind to myself.